Carlos Nelson with What's Up Kansas City, and today on our political segment we have 3rd District Councilman Brandon Ellington. Brandon, welcome to the show.
What's going on, man?
It's all good, Brandon. I want to talk to you about Kansas City in general and some of the things that are affecting the African American community. I want to talk about the legislation and bills that you've passed, and where do you see us going forward? Tell our audience a little bit about your first, how many days we got you've been in office?
Man, I've been in there since August 2nd, I believe, something like that. So my first 3-4 months has been extremely interesting on the council because 360-degree difference between what it was at the Capitol. So at the Capitol, I'm used to, floor procedures, fighting vigorously for issues, etc. On the council, the appetite for debate isn't the same as it is at the Capitol. So I've been able to get a few ordinances passed so far. Most of these you will see with the new budget cycle starting in April, you'd actually start to see the effects. But it's extremely interesting.
Off camera, I talked to you about housing in our community and the gentrification. How do you read that?
Gentrification is opportunity. I know people don't like hearing that, right? So we look at gentrification negatively because this is our opportunity leaving us. Other people look at it as business where I can buy this property for this amount of money and I'm gonna make this much off of it because it's really more valuable than what has been invested in previous issues. So when we come to gentrification, I want us to understand that if we aren't buying lots, if we aren't buying the houses, if we aren't buying the buildings, somebody's going to occupy those. Now, I would prefer to see people that lived in the area first to be owning those houses, owning that property, owning the land, etc. But we have to understand the intrinsic value of ownership. And that's something that we're starting to push out. I have a housing summit that should be coming up very soon before the summer. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that we're going to be pushing out to teach people how to acquire these houses, how to invest in the area that they're already in. My first 6 months, some of the things I did was my 5th job fair targeting ex-offenders, and that's in that same venue because people have barriers to getting jobs and they have barriers to accumulating wealth to be able to invest.
On that note, because I'm getting ready to get in touch with Senator David Haley because Alvin Sykes and him had been working with the incarcerated brothers. I called my girl Barbara Courtney. She had been trying to do some things with incarceration. And now that the marijuana laws have changed, more people are being let out that had those type charges. And where do they go to work? And where do they get trained? And where do they get skill set? And you've worked in that field. Talk to them about how you see and what you see we need to be doing as a community as it relates to our brothers and sisters that have been incarcerated.
I'm gonna come all the way around because now you gave me an issue to vent on. So part of my first 6 months, right? Mm-hmm. I had a marijuana ordinance that was on the table. The marijuana ordinance I had on the table was to decriminalize marijuana at 100 grams or less. Mm-hmm. But why is this important with the question that you just asked? It takes elected leaders in community to actually understand the gravity and the weight of the law. So the council changed my ordinance to expungement at 32 grams or less on a municipal level. Well, this is a fallacy or a conscious effort to create more victims of the criminal justice system. And what I mean by that, under my first proposal, decriminalization, there would have been no fine, no arrest, no record. Underneath the municipal expungement, immediately that record goes to the state, and same with that plea deal. So on the low end level, you have a municipal record that's clean, that's expunged, and now you have a state record that would always be there. Well, now let's go to the gravity of actually opening up jobs and ensuring that we have access to the marijuana market since it's marginally legal in the state of Missouri. Well, the council is going to have to be extremely cognizant of creating ordinances that don't restrict people's ability to be able to have warehouses, etc., coupled with a state law that is currently, or state constitutional provision that is currently discriminating against people not only on the caps but the ability of the department to issue license, which we have seen that equity and disparity is not at the top or the forefront of what the Missouri Senior and Health Service Department is actually doing.
Tell me this: how do you feel the business climate is for African American businesses in the metro area? How I've seen things since I've been in business, and I've been in business all my life, especially here, over the last decade. I see downtown these different organizations creating these Plex pods and all of this, those type things, that they're not doing business with the black businesses that are in business, but yet they're trying to put this image out here that we're here to help the African American community do this and that. And from my perspective, it's only a means to employ the majority community at the decision-making level, and it's a trickle-down effect. And by the time every dollar that was allocated to help small business or help do anything in our community, we're getting a nickel or quarter on the dollar.
All right, man. How much time do I got?
Hold it. That's the beauty of owning your own company. And we talked about you inviting people to dinner, but you've cooked the dinner, you bought the dinner, and you're supplying it. Eat as much as you want, but this is my house. And that's how I feel about Cascade.
Oh, well, let me go ahead and get to cooking a little bit.
Yeah.
So when we talk about business incentives and what we see, and I'm just going to correspond a couple things and tie them together. So downtown, we have incentivize. Since I've been on the council, we passed a few measures, one for a parking lot, another one for the Wadle and Reed, which was $104 million, 104 altogether, like 34 million from the city. It was 44 million, got dropped down by 10 million while we was on the floor. The fourplexes, the quadplexes that you was talking about. Well, I'm gonna tie this into gentrification, which you asked about earlier, which is opportunities, right? So when we look at the east side and we look at the lack there of quadplexes, when we look at the lack there of incentivized development, when we look at the lack there of businesses, we're looking at us not being aggressive with tools that we need, right? So I'm not mad at people on the west side. I'm not mad at people downtown for understanding how they can utilize these tools. I'm mad at us for not stopping it and not forcing the issue to make sure that we have it in our area. So some of the things that I've been working on will spur development in the third because of the...
Cut you off. The key thing that you just said to me,
Yeah.
I caught not having it in our area.
Yeah. Well, it has to be dispersed. But I can't. I'm going to use my Northland colleagues as an example because I'm at large. So I've supported a few things in Southern North. I can't be mad at them for having a walking trail or having improvements of the park or wanting traffic lights. I can only be mad at us for not having or working with developers to have plans in front of the council similar. So one of the things I've been working on is 3 development projects that I've started. Then we got the Housing Summit that we have coming up.
When is that coming up, or do you picked a date yet?
Well, I've actually been working with Stacey Johnson.
All right.
Stacey Johnson College, excuse me, on that. We have a meeting this week, so she's helping me organize that. I think we're shooting for April around that.
Excellent.
And that should be around the time that we're doing our 6th job fair targeting ex-offenders. So everything that I've been doing has been building the platform not only of transparency, but actual for folks to actually actualize and see what they mean. And if I can, on the very then come back to the development. So the first Fridays of every month, we've been doing a monthly mixer at the Soiree. The monthly mixer is myself, composed of people from the city, and the whole thing is to talk about issues. And
what time?
12:30 to 2:30. First Fridays, Soiree. And the whole thing is...
and Soiree is down on 18th and Vine, right there on the corner of Paseo and 18th and Vine, people. We'll see you there.
Yeah, come through. Because not only do we talk about issues, we address them immediately. And it's a way that I can not only educate the community, but create a mobilization unit inside of that community. The second Mondays of every month, 6 p.m., at the Greg Kleist Community Center, we do the 3rd District monthly meeting, and that would be myself and Councilwoman Robinson. And then I have a few things that will be rolling out February and April that would be community engagement mechanisms for folks a little bit younger. So going back to the economic tools or the lack thereof, it is on us, in my opinion, to actually come to the table with development that we want to see in the community, and then make sure that we're getting those resources. Now let's look at the Waddell and Reed as an example. The Waddell and Reed, you have a council that is broken up, right? You have half black, half white, for whatever that means. You have east, south of the river, north of the river, right? So when we look at what needs to be being leveraged, I believe that those that represent the most economically stressed areas should be ensuring that if we are doing tax incentives, that we have stuff on that table that will bring positive benefits back. Example, community benefit agreement is something that is extremely easy to put on the table and to force a company that is taking our tax dollars to put something back in whatever creative mechanism that we choose. That wasn't part of the deal. I could not support the Waddell and Reed because it had nothing that was going to benefit overtly.
Let me say this. I've been in the city since 1978, and I've always had my own business. And I have never went to the city council and spoke against anything besides that Waddell and Reed. Yeah. That was just wrong.
Yeah.
Totally wrong. They've given the house away, and you were so clever on that, as far as I'm concerned. You did your research. Waddell and Reed was over here in Kansas City. Mm-hmm. They made some moves over in Kansas, said they're going to give them some money. They moved over to Kansas. Mm-hmm. Now the purse strings are loose over here. Now they want to move back here. Yeah. And I don't know whether it was you or somebody else in that coalition said, really, only 100 jobs are going to be be
No, that was me, and it wasn't even 100. So we're talking about a total, and I'm going to be a little off of the numbers, 1,038, right? 950 or 975, something like that, of those jobs was already Waddell and Reed employees. That leaves roughly about 180, something like that, jobs available for people in Kansas City. The starting salary of this company is $166,000. They told us that they was going to run people through FEC. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think you're going through FEC coming out with $166,000 at a financial institution. No, I don't see that happening.
And hold it. Off camera, I told you I was a founding board member of the Full Employment Council, and I was over all classroom training. What I've just seen in my tenure, it was like on the job training. They would match the funds for 6 months or whatever, but as soon as the matching funds, then they would let the employees go.
Well, look at this deal that we did with this, because I'm glad you said that. We don't even have a deal in which, all right, we did a 15-year lease. So it's a difference when you do 15 years, you build a building, you're going to stay here, or at least you invested in this building. We did a 15-year lease. After 15 years, they do what they want to do. And even inside of that 15-year lease, they can do what they want to do pretty much because of the
way it's structured.
Yeah, yeah. And now let's dial back and let's say that we was going to use financial tools from the city to incentivize small business growth and to create a network underneath these small businesses in which they have a few years to become successful and they don't have a burden on them. Well, we can do that, and that's 100% beneficial to the city because now you have new businesses, new proprietors, you have new people on the tax rolls, you have natural investors that are hiring people from the community, etc. And you're saving and recycling your tax dollars as opposed to not capturing tax dollars from an entity that has no long-term desire to be here.
Tell me this, how do you feel about this statement? Because I'm president of the Kansas City Business Association, and for the longest, and I'm calling out names, might be get a suit or whatever, but let them come. Highland Dairy, and you have a whole lot of different businesses in the urban core, and they don't do anything to give back. They sell to our school systems. They sell to us, but they don't do anything but do the business and then go back out to the suburbs.
Well, I would say, depending on the business that you're talking about, what are we doing to actually reach out to them? And I'm going to use an example. Wild Woody sits in the middle of the inner city. I know for a fact that when we reached out to Wild Woody, shout out to York Wilson, SWD, when we reached out to Wild Woodies, they immediately donated. Right, so I do a charity event every year where we give away dinners and all this good stuff. I think this year was our 13th or 14th year doing the community Thanksgiving dinner. Well, Wild Woody stepped in and they gave us or supplemented everything that we didn't have without asking. Highland Dairy I haven't reached out to that I know of, but the reason I said that is I do a job fair, and this goes to the heart of leadership and what we should be expecting from people that consider themselves or have been put in a position to actually have access. For the past 3 or 4 years, we've been doing job fairs. Like I said, this April will be our 6th job fair, and we created a network of companies that actually hire people with felonies. And a lot of these companies are companies that's in the community that we just sort of reaching out to. So I would say it's a twofold thing. One, as a community, we have to start reaching out. And then if these companies don't give it back.
But who has to reach out, as far as I'm concerned, is people that that's what they've been voted in the office, and some of our prominent people. And you know what? You're right, because I reached out to Granger. You know, they're right over there by Arthur Bryant's.
Yeah.
I called their headquarters. I didn't follow up on it, but they said, yeah, just get with so-and-so and so-and-so.
Yeah. And I'm saying this and I'm talking in this fashion because I want most of the people that are watching this to understand that at the end of the day, we have to have ownership over everything, right? Ownership over what we allow people to do to us and ownership over what we do. Like no in-betweens. I can't control one's motivation, but I can for sure control what that motivation is allowed to do once you come over here. Like
You see what happened at Lincoln Prep, how they built that field, and I think they got quite a few corporate people to put in, and I think that type of model can really help us in our community.
No, it can't. Now, let me dial back a little bit, though. So, Lincoln did a good job of external fundraising, but when we talk about our governmental institutions, we should have a high expectation of investment because these are tax dollars that's already supposed to be there. Now, I'm going to use ACE as an example. Before they became ACE, they were Southeast. And going back to the 70s, they had a swimming pool that was in utilization. Once you hit like the 80s, 85, all the way up into now, that swimming pool is a closed off segment of that school. Well, we should actually be demanding that these kids have access to a swimming pool. Not only
Central just got theirs back cracking.
Yeah, I'm just saying, right? And these are expectations that we should have. Now, when you have booster clubs, et cetera, to get auxiliary things, yeah, you want that. But we should have an expectation, even in the inner city, we should have an expectation that sidewalks are actually paved and the streets are drivable and that these buildings are actually secure and safe. Now, on the other end of that, we shouldn't be satisfied with buildings being boarded up. We should look at these buildings as opportunities, because if we don't, then we're going to have gentrification.
Tell me this. What do you see our community, I'm saying one-on-one, how do you see that we need to be organized? And I put this out here. I've said this to you. I think that our communication system is broke. When you were a youngster, and I talked to you about, my son said, oh, I went to school with Brandon at King. Once upon a time, you had the Kansas City Call 25 years ago, 30 years ago. 95% of every African American had that call on Friday. And that let you know what was going on in your community. But you can't wait a whole week to get information now. How do you feel that we've used the tools to bring our community together? Talk about what you're doing with the show on Cape,
All right, I'm gonna go frontwards and backwards.
All right.
I would say with the tools that we have, those tools have been used to divide the community, to fragment the community, and in my opinion, to keep the community ignorant. right? So when we talk about the mediums of entertainment and the mediums of education, whether that's newspapers, radio shows, magazines, comedy shows, whatever medium that we want to have, a lot of our mediums have been utilized to, again, keep us ignorant. I'm just going to talk about myself. I've been in office 8.5 years at the state and about 5 months down here at the city council. Most of my community events are not publicized in papers or mediums in the community, not because I don't send press releases, right? Because I don't have an associated check along with that press release. So what I've been blessed to do is work with people that want to get information out in the community, and we've been building coalitions to make sure that the information that we put out is not only viable, it is also self-sustaining. And I said that to answer your question. I think that mediums consistently change, but in our community, it has to be, what's the word I want to use? It has to be a line drawn between what you represent and what you don't. And I think with a lot of the younger folks, you're starting to see people side up without hesitation. You're starting to see a lot of the old policies or old culture ways of doing things no longer being effective because people aren't buying into them no more. So as opposed,
that's the same thing with the churches now.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, you're seeing societal change, and part of that, in my opinion, would be what people receive when they go. Because if I go someplace and you tell me that 1 and 1 is 16, and every day I come and I believe 1 and 1 is 16, and then I just happen to see two things, I'm like, oh, that's one, that's two. I no longer want to go to your stuff, regardless of how much power or embedding that you have in the community or stronghold. And I think that's what you're starting to see with information. And one of the things that I try to do is be transparent and honest. I'm not perfect, but I try to be transparent and honest about information. So somebody can not like me for my view, but it's going to be an honest view. But once they start seeing that honesty, I think they start seeing through stuff. Like, hold on, this is why we ain't had nothing over here. It was not my fault, bro. This is where your money's been going. I'm not saying A, B, do this.
But what I'm saying is, how do we break that cycle? Because how I look at it from a layman's standpoint, it's all about that vote. I don't think we still understand that. We've been saying that since civil rights. Mm-hmm. We have made some traction, but I think they have a society right now. They have most of us. How we gonna put a bottle of milk on the table? And we're not looking at the big picture.
Yeah, but no, I agree with you. But again, even that is our fault, right? Society. All right. The easiest way. Let me see an easy way to put it. Your future your present is made up of your understanding of the past, right? So as you're interacting with something, you're remembering past events or past thoughts, and this makes your perception of what's happening right now. All right, the future is only what we decide it to be, nothing else. It can't be anything else. So when we talk about society and the average person being a victim of society, it's because this is what we're comfortable with. When you look at the cost of food, when you look at the cost of housing, when you look at the cost of utilities, etc., we see everything is rising, but nothing has changed, right? We don't produce less eggs, we produce more eggs, but yet eggs are higher. The same when you look at oysters, and I was just looking at a special on oysters. Oysters we used to take out of the ocean, we used to take out of the lakes, now we harvest those, right? So we mass produce stuff, which means costs to be cheaper. But as a society, we choose to freely give our stuff away. The same when we talk about what's happening here. It doesn't make sense that in Kansas City we pay a higher tax than pretty much anybody in the state, but we have nothing. Well, we have nothing because we choose to allow it. And I use the city council as an example. Everybody works here. Everybody pays some form of tax, whether you go to the store or what have you. And then we watch our tax money go to stuff, and then we come outside and we can't walk down the street. Or if I'm elderly and I'm in the wheelchair, I'm stuck right now. I couldn't even roll my wheelchair to the street because the street still has snow on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is a basic city service. And if we voted and stayed engaged, because I think the biggest lie is your vote counts. No, your vote only counts if you participate and you pay attention. If the only thing you do is vote, then you just wasted your time. Now, if you vote and you participate, meaning I'm attending these meetings or I'm paying attention to what's happening in these meetings, I'm emailing these folks, I'm calling these folks, then you have a different body politics. And I think that, again, going back to transparency and forcing understanding in folks is ultimately going to get that mobilization where not only folks on the east side, but most of these folks that are in poor working conditions, they're going to stop taking it. And that's what I'm working on.
John, we had a session, I think it was Mickey Dean, Oscar Bolton, and John Webster and myself, and we talked about some of these issues on camera. And one thing I really didn't realize, John said he doesn't care who gets elected if you don't send them there with a program and what you want, they're going to do what. How do you feel about that?
I'm gonna say it's the opposite, because you can't send me anywhere with a program.
When I say from the community, I'm saying
this is what I'm saying. The way I consider myself is I'm a representative of the community. Mm-hmm. I'm not separate from the community. So and I talk about culture and ethnicity is not synonymous, right? Culture is everything that you like, music you like, environment you like, food that you like, lifestyle that you like, right? That's culture. When we talk about genetics, then we have everything else. Race is a social construct. So when I talk about culture, I represent a very specific culture and a mindset. So when I go on the floor, I'm not banging for everybody in the world. I'm banging for a certain culture and a certain mindset. And this culture actually supersedes racial lines because, again, it goes to culture. How one likes to think, eat, drink, socialize, etc., and what have you. And in the body politics, I think that's what we get away from. We get away from electing people that represent culture, and we look more for ethnicity or identity politics, which is not smart. Just voting for somebody that looks like me doesn't give me good stuff.
Right.
Just depending on somebody that looks like me, if I was to go back through history, shows me that that's not wise. It was a time, and Malcolm said it better than anybody, you had the house and the field. They both looked alike. They didn't have the same motivations. And it's similar today in all racial enclaves. It's just understanding culture. And that's what I go for. I try to go for culture. I try to mobilize those that have a like-minded understanding. And I try to get us to understand that if we work together, we're going to get what we want. If we don't, we get nothing.
My favorite saying about our community, and when I came here, Bernard Powell said, "Ghetto or gold mine, the choice is yours."
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah. What do you got? What are you doing with the youth? And
man,
what do you got for our youngsters?
Got a whole bunch of stuff. See, I don't talk about stuff we ain't did, so I can go through everything.
Yeah, run it down.
Well, obviously, I got to give a shout out to Miss E, my mother, and Charles Johnson.
All right, Miss E, baby boy shouting out at you.
Yeah, so we got the now this is I'm gonna hit you with a couple things. We got the Young Kings, Young Queens program.
What's that about? Yeah.
Young Kings, Young Queens, a mentor program. They do everything from arts and crafts to culinary, and then you have the Young Kings that are obviously teaching these young gentlemen how to be men, how to hold it down, different stuff like that. And they're involved in the culinary, etc. And they meet the Saturday, and we also have martial arts involved. Shout out to Zoe. And a few other elements that takes place for poetry, etc. And they meet at Vineyard off of 43rd Street at Saturdays from like 12 to 4. Now that's...
Vineyard be doing a lot of things. They had their own Kwanzaa.
Oh yeah, no, they did. But I used that to dial back to something that I passed and then things that we're actually going to infuse. So sometime around October, November, I passed the support hubs. Support hubs allows people to bypass land bank and bypass all the other red tape and acquire property that the city owns, whether that's houses, buildings, etc. And then they go in whatever type of lease or buying agreement that entity can negotiate with the city, right, on the scope of that business, so that it doesn't have to pay a whole bunch of their small business, etc. This creates a venue for programs like Young Kings and Young Queens and other people in the community that actually has positive programs. So growing up, one of the things that I notice is you have people that may look like you, that say they represent the community that gets money, and then they don't deal with nobody that looks like you, right? And then you have a whole bunch of people from the community that care and they do stuff, but they don't have any type of funding or any type of structure to actually help them grow with what they're really doing. So one of the things that I'm working on is reallocating city dollars and then creating platforms for the community to actually have more community self-determination by not only taking over ownership, but producing our own programs. So when we look at the amount of criminal justice dollars that we spend here in the city, we see that there's a continual arc up, and then there's an arc up with violent crime. So it seems that the more that we spend on these programs that aren't rooted in evidence-based community procedures, we get more crime, less results for our bucks.
I'm glad you mentioned that crime thing, because I keep saying this, and I don't care what nobody say, and I'm 68, and I've been there, done that. I feel a lot of the crime that's in the African American community in general is because of lack of resources and lack of opportunity, and they have the African American community really boxed in, and our youth, when you don't see no daylight, when you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, there's no telling what you'll do.
I agree with you, and then I don't. So I agree with you when we talk about economic disparities. I agree with you when we talk about an uneven playing field. Right? But then I don't. Because all of that is things that we can ultimately control.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about that.
But even when we talk about opportunities, I grew up watching my mother sell balloons and then watching cats in the streets, right? And I gravitated towards the cats in the streets because not only did culture tell me this is what you're supposed to do, dominant media, mainstream media also created a narrative of this is what you're supposed to do. So not only was culture being influenced by dominant mainstream media of creating an identity, culture was actually buying into that and being part of it, right? So I walked all of that, and I talk arrogantly about it when I talk about walking back. So those that are willing to kick up in the house, or those that are hustling and selling dope and all of this good stuff, those are the same skills that need to be applied across the board.
Right.
And we can't use excuses. We can't say that, they drop dope and guns off. Well, then that's saying that they drop dope and guns off, and we know they drop dope and guns off, and when we use these dope and guns, then we can't blame them for doing it, because we're not ignorant to the fact that they're doing it. If you're doing it for
well, like you said, you disagree. This is where I'm at.
Well, hold on, I'm not finished though, because if you're dropping it off for my destruction, then I need to understand the order of war, and I use everything for my destruction for my benefit. So when we talk about the community and we say, well, we can't get jobs, cool. I don't want you to hire me. I want to create my own job. That way I don't need you. The same with housing. I use Santa Fe as an example. There's a documentary out on Santa Fe right now.
I just sent the land, something about, boy, that was really well done.
Now it was. You know what makes me mad about it though? Is the amount of folks that walk through or around Santa Fe and we throw trash out. Well, all right, not only did we have an area in which everybody moved out when black folks started moving in. We know this is a affluent area, and we should be fighting on the reverse end. We should be saying that this is one of the premier areas of Kansas City, and y'all gonna invest in it. Not trying to move out to the suburbs or something else because we feel like that's better.
That's where ghetto or gold mine comes into play.
But that brings me back to the excuses that we typically use, and I get it. Survival mode and having the ability to be able to sit back and observe is two different things.
We're in survival mode most of the time.
Yeah, which leads me to my anger of those that are in positions that are supposed to represent us, or in position of access that has the ability to sit back a little bit, and they do nothing to alleviate survival mode. And again, that's what we're working on.
This is where I'm at with the African American community. The people that really can help us is our middle class, but most of them are brain dead, and most of them have been indoctrinated and programmed really to do what they're doing and not really understand that they've been programmed.
I give you that they've been programmed. I would actually say our greatest asset is those that are in poverty and extreme poverty, right? Because when you grow up in poverty and when you survive winters with no heat, and you know how to make nothing out of something, and you know how to survive off of skills, wit, aggression, and whatever, right? That's a greater skill. I think our biggest issue is that we haven't brought into ourselves, and I'm talking about we because I consider myself one of those that come from the gutter, right? I'm not out of the gutter. I come from the gutter, and I have no problem with surrounding myself with people in the gutter. I feel comfortable, right? Because they're more honest. The problem is that collectively we choose not to fight. And that's one thing that I want us to understand, that collectively if we chose to fight,
But the reason why, I had another show with Ajamu, Carl Bussey, myself, and Kim were there. And as I said in that show, African Americans, they have us in a position, especially in the overall workplace, that you can't even talk about certain issues because there's, oh, you know, he said this, I think we need to let him go.
Again, that brings me back to my point. The ones that are not the middle class. Again, I come from most of those affluent so-called African Americans. They talk about it. Ah, man, he's ghetto. Dude, I'm not ghetto. I'm hood. But I have.
I love that. Right.
I mean, but
there's
real.
A difference.
But I have no issue with that because I don't want to be like y'all. I don't want to walk in the room and be afraid to say what's on my mind because I'm worried about somebody pulling my strings. I'm good on that. You can't do anything to me except send me back to Prospect. But dig this, you know where I live at? I live off 40th and Prospect. So you can't even send me back there because I'm
there. Yeah.
Right? So you can't take anything from me because you haven't built anything. And when I look at those that survive the Section 8, that survive food stamps, that survive houses with roaches and windows that are broken and plastic bags over the window and all of that good stuff. Only thing I want us to see is like, look, this isn't living and we're allowing others to benefit off of us not living. You can keep that. We're going to build our own community gardens and then we're going to sell our own produce. The same with the house and stock. I don't need that house. We're just going to take this little house and repair it. You mentioned something earlier that everybody should be mad at. I got my house for under $10,000, right? At the time, I was actually looking at houses in Santa Fe. I found a couple of them down there for $10,000, $14,000. Now these houses are $150,000, $200,000, right? And these are the same land trust houses that anybody could acquire. But the problem was we didn't value it because we was told we was in the hood. And this is one thing that I want us to understand. The same when we talk about social pseudonyms. We're giving social pseudonyms. I'm an Aborigine. You know what I'm saying? Like, my skin is on the empirical chart, or at least the melanin in my skin. Well, this is something that we need to understand because once we start understanding this, we start looking at ourselves and we start looking at our surroundings different. And that's one thing that I'm trying to bring to us is nothing else matters. Ownership matters. So we own everything. We own our condition and we own what we don't have. And once we start owning that, then we start benefiting.
Tell me this, how do you feel, see, I think I mentioned to you my other life in construction. I never was an MBE. I never, and to me though, that's a stumbling block. Why should I have to go to the city and say, and fill out, and it's an arduous task to get certified as an MBE when white people don't have to get certified that they white?
Yeah. All right. Now, this is a twofold thing because I believe in fairity across the board, and I actually hate certain things. But when you talk about MBE, WBE programs, etc., they're needed because so-called minorities aren't getting contracts. The problem is that there's a whole bunch of loopholes in the MBE, WBE process, and there's a whole bunch of red tape. But now we're talking about who benefits off of what. Because when we talk about governmental dollars, I don't think there should be priorities over not making sure that everybody has access to the business, and that's what we typically see, because the big boys get it and the small subcontractors don't. That's a problem, because we're talking about taxpayer dollars, and those taxpayer dollars should not be utilized in a discriminatory fashion. So I'm gonna give you an example. So now this is one I have not passed. I have an ordinance that would that would kick out for 2 years contractors that are caught discriminating in the city. But this ordinance went from committee to the floor, back to legal review. Then I think they pushed it over to workforce, and then they brought it back on the floor and they killed it. Right now, the issue with this is that it would actually address the loopholes in the WBE MBE program, but nobody wants that, because they want a process in which you can exclude and discriminate against people, and then part of that is that red tape that you're talking about. However, access for so-called minority businesses is critical when you talk about governmental dollars. And
the largest employer around.
Yeah, and we need programs. Unfortunately, we need programs to ensure that so-called minorities are getting a piece of the pie.
Well,
because they're not.
Let me say this to you, because when MBE first came out, I think I told you I was in construction in the late 70s and 80s. I had went down to Jeff City. My boy Vernon Thompson, I talked to him the other night. He was in your state rep, and we were talking about an lineman. I forgot, he's gone now. We went down there to talk in front of the senators and what have you. And I asked them, because I had a bunch of white people, I said, have you ever been in a place where you and your spouse or whatever were the only white person and you were surrounded by, I said, how did you feel? You know, and I know how they felt, and I said, that's how a black man feels from the time he comes out of his mother's womb in America. And now you got the MBE, and they didn't want to even do the 10% at that time. And then what they wind up doing is watering that down with the WMB and this and that. And as I said in some other interviews, they put us in a pot that was designed for us, and then they put all these other people in the pot with us, and then we wind up at the bottom of the pot, and they just used us, just like I was saying about some other things, that everybody's making money off of our poverty and our hurt.
Yeah.
To a degree.
No, I'm not disagreeing with that. My only disagreement is understanding the structure of what should be, right? So you got, I'm just gonna put a hard hat.
Please.
You contractor. You know, you got the cement, you got the nails, you got all of that good stuff. I'm your elected official. You elected me, right? You're a contractor. When the contract comes before the council, since I'm on the council, I'm gonna keep it on the local level, you should be expecting me to ensure that these numbers are in there and that these contracts are going to be opened up to folks. I think that's part of the issue, because you have the contractor and then you have the elected official, and I use the airport.
I was going to get to the airport. I'm glad you want. I was going to get to the airport.
Well, I had to think.
Yeah.
I use the airport as an example. So the airport, the so-called minority numbers are horrific, but money is still being allocated. Right, and that would also be on the. I wasn't here when they did that deal, but that would also be on the first premise when that deal is being brung. So far on the council, I've stood up and I voted against a whole bunch of contract renewals when it comes to so-called minority numbers. Well, why is this important? It's important because if you had a majority of the of ethnic elected council members that was making ethnic questions, notice I'm talking about ethnicity as opposed to culture, that was making ethnic questions, then you will have more of an emphasis before it hits the council to make sure these numbers is adjusted. And I know this from being at the state. At the state level with the caucus, for a few years when I was chair of the caucus, we made it a mandate to get people on the judicial board and also people that came before us. You couldn't just come in here talking about, I'm black and I want the black caucus to represent. No, brother, what are you gonna do? What's your record and what you bring into the table? And that became a statement, even with some of our votes. When I first got in there, people was like, this, and that. And then after about 4 or 5 months, it was like, y'all really are a voting bloc. Yeah. We
Do you think we understand how important it is to hold our politicians accountable?
No. Not yet. I think we're
and how do you see we need to go about that? Because I think that is
it's easy. Show up to the monthly mixers first Friday at the soiree, 12:30
Ow,
to
baby
2:30.
boy.
What's real talk? We on the first and third Sunday at KUAW, and the reason I mention those is because this is not platforms for just opinion. These are platforms to get factual information out. And I think that as more folks that have an understanding like I do, they just need information.
They need to be able to get that information out to their constituents and to the community.
Yeah.
And I think, that's why I started Cascade Media Group. And most people really, even black people, don't really look at what the situation is. The majority community owns 99 and 900% of every communication form on the planet. Print, all of that. And they edit out different things and they put things the way they want it. And I, one thing about Donald Trump has laid it out. It's a pay-to-play game, and you pay and I make it happen.
Hey man, the dude is scary, man. But I would also boil it back.
But do you believe that?
No,
Is it a pay-to-play? And that's how I even see Waddell and Reed and most of the development that has come downtown. I have Crosby Kemper on, and he's got this new position now. And we talk like we're talking now. And Crosby says, "Who do you see license plates at these construction? Them people don't even live. Half of them don't even live in the city."
Yeah, I wouldn't boil it down to a simple, direct pay-for-play scheme. I would boil it down to more or less being happy to be in the room. And what I mean by that, you could sit me at a table with somebody that is extremely wealthy. Mm-hmm. I'm not impressed because that wealth is mine, right? And I also know while I'm sitting at the table, I'm representing a whole bunch of people that voices aren't heard, right? Not only ethnicity, but I'm talking about culture. Their voices aren't heard. I'm not in here to feel cool. I'm here to represent them. So when I'm sitting at the table, it's a different level of leverage. I'm just talking in general. I'm not talking about anybody.
But I think you're different from all of the politicians. You know who you remind me of? I had this conversation with Jim Watts last night. My guy Charles Hasley. Charles Hasley was a bulldog, and he wasn't going to let you run over his community. And you are so subtle at what you're saying. You said, and this is how I feel. A lot of them just be happy that they're at the table.
Yeah, they just happy they're at the table. I got something funny to say about Charles Hasley, because it's funny to me. So in the past, I'm talking when I was younger, 19, 20, and all this good stuff, I would show up to meetings, I'd make issues. So one day I'm sitting in the room with Hasley, and we was talking. And dude looked at me and said, "I didn't know you could talk." I was like, "What the?" So it's funny to me because he likes to.
Yeah. Well, when I was in construction, right over there by the post office on 18th Street, I put all the sidewalks, driveways, and basements. Charles lived there. Alex Harris lived there. Tyndall lived there. A couple other people were there, and Charles was really adamant about. He wasn't passing anything that was not going to benefit our community. But I was just seeing over the last 2 decades, politicians that were supposed to be representing us just let everything go.
It goes back to what I said at the beginning. Voting without participating engagement is ridiculous. And there's also the reason I said you couldn't just bring me anything. Right? So it's a difference between somebody coming to you saying, "Hey, I'm going to represent you," or "Hey, I'm going to help you out," or "Hey, you're in this situation, let me pull you up." I came about it, and I've been blessed in this instance. I didn't come at it from that. I didn't come at it, "Hey, let me reach my hand down." Nah, brother, I'm in the same trench as you are, man. I can just articulate it a little bit better than you. But we feeling the same thing.
Same pain.
Same situation, same issue. Let me go talk for you if you rock with me. Right, and that's how I've been blessed at the Capitol and down here. And people say that he has his own support base and all this good stuff. No, I'm just blessed to actually be a real representative. I represent the people that put me here, and because we're the same, we fight together. And this is some of the things that you're seeing different. And the throwing of the net out is just bringing more folks in, because I know that culture and ethnicity is not synonymous.
Do you think? I have been trying for the longest to put some things together. I don't think that I think we should be having a think tank.
It depends on who's in that think tank.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying who's in it,
Yeah.
but I think that we're not doing things like that to look where we're going at least 10 years. You know, the majority community, they 100 years down the line and what's going to happen. But I think that's part of our problem, that we're not thinking this thing all the way out collectively and then trying to implementation.
Yeah. Yeah. Only thing I would caution is that if everybody's not the same, and everybody doesn't have the same motivation, one needs to be extremely selective of who they organize and try to move forward with.
Oh no! Hey,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
hey, there's no doubt about that. Do you know? When I was in construction, I was at 24, 14, 16, 18 Vine, and I renovated the courthouse downtown, courthouse in Independence, Lake Jacomo Sheriff Station. Right there, 27th in Brooklyn, the parks, I put the shelters in. I'm saying I did a ton of work. But what I realized, the money was in development, right? And so I started looking at how to develop. And coming from Vine to Prospect, all that, 20 years ago they put those houses and what have you. And Hallmark put them houses there. I don't know whether you know that. What they do, they form these companies, they make the money, and then the company goes out of business where they don't guarantee anything. And then they give a few of these jobs to some black people, and that quiets everything down. And I see that's been the modus operandi that has really permeated in, I call it the head nigga in charge. They try to give all this work or select amount to certain people or and they supposed to represent our community. And to me, you're working on them giving you that type of, but they never would just give that opportunity to you. Hey, here's this pot of money, or we're going to work with you on these issues, and they truly work with you that to benefit our community. How do you feel about that statement, that head nigga in charge statement? Do you see that that's how they try to deal with us, the majority community, with our leadership?
Yeah, well, leadership is always funny to me, and I talk about it the way I talk about it because most of the people that have been in positions of leadership, I don't consider them my leader, right? So when you talk about, and this is why I keep talking about information. When you talk about ignorance, and then somebody has a semblance of information, yes, they can control everybody down here to see. And we see that a lot. Now, with saying that, I have to be mad at both. I have to be mad at everybody down here because we allowing this cat. We know he's not right. We know he's not right. And then definitely mad at this cat because you knew more. So I'm going to hit you with something that a Republican told me, and maybe this will explain it. So we sitting there, and he was like, "Hey, Ellington, man, you know why we like you?" And he wasn't trying to be racist.
Right.
I was like, "Why?" He's like, "You're really black. Don't take this the wrong way. You're really black." I was like, "Yeah, I'm cool, man. I'm not going to take it the wrong way because I prefer you call me black than anything else." But what he was saying is that you don't come up here, this is at the state, you don't come up here and you don't try to change your dialect, you don't try to change what you want, and you really fight for your people. We respect that. You know why? Because he knows that I'm not accommodating anything for what we want. And I would boil that back down to leadership down here. That was the other part of the thing, because we was talking about funding. And it was a gentleman up there that was coming up there for funding. And the other part of the convo, he was like, "Well, hell, why should we give you guys more money when y'all don't do nothing to improve?" And I understood it from his viewpoint. Like, all right, you don't never come to where I'm at. You from a rural area. All you see is a couple $1 million going to Kansas City, and then every year they talking about crime and murder in Kansas City. I get it. The problem is that you're giving the money to him, and see, I'm from the city. We don't never see him. So this is where the breakdown is. The breakdown isn't in the money. The breakdown is who is occupying that dollars and who is and where that money is.
But that's what I call the head nigga in charge.
But that goes back to us disseminating information, right? And then also being culturally conscious, not identity conscious, but culturally conscious. If I live off Prospect. If I live off Prospect and you tell me you're a leader and I don't see you nowhere around here, you can't live like me, right? If you're not living like me, then you can't understand my suffering.
What was the name of that documentary? Something like on Santa Fe?
I mean, you ain't gonna get me in trouble on that. I'm not gonna mess that one up. It's on KCPT.
Yeah, but you know what, audience, especially the black audience, you really need to look at that. And on this interview, I'm going to post what that is, because Benton and Santa Fe, that was like Ward Parkway when there was no Ward Parkway the way they have it now. There was no plaza. That was the place to be.
And to be honest, it still is. If you look at the tide of disinvestment and new investment, you'll see that tide is going over that same area. The only issue is that people that's been living in that area since they broke the color line have been moving out or have been losing their property. And that's why we need to buy what we can and then invest. And I got some plans from the city, but in order to get a lot of this stuff done, I need my community to be conscious, and I'm working on it.
All right. Well, Brandon, man, it's been a pleasure to have you in. And as I said to you before, I'd like you to have your own show, even though you're on Georgia's thing, where you can bring some guests on and talk about some major issues, and we try to get this out to more of our community. And I still feel that we're in such bad shape that we can't pay attention to things that are very important and back to people that we need to be backing, because we're so busy trying to earn a living and take care of our families.
I agree with you on survival mode. The only
I like using that. I'm going to steal that term because that's where we're at. We're in survival mode.
No, trust me, I lived a long part of my life in survival mode. And then I was blessed to be able to travel between realities.
Boy, that survival mode is something else, man.
Give you your skills. That's why I said those that are in the gutter are those that...
I know I'm in survival mode.
Those are our diamonds. Those are our diamonds. And that's why I do so much for the underprivileged, because I understand that the underprivileged is everything. And we're only underprivileged because we choose to allow people to give us our direction and to give us identity. And last thing I'm going to say, I'm going to so part of my old state district went out to Independence, right? When I first got elected, Independence reporters called. Very, 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 very racist. He was like, yes, I mean, I just got elected. I'm talking about they just read the name on the TV. I'm like, yay! Get a phone call.
Was you happy?
Oh, well, was hey, get a phone call. He's like, so how you gonna represent both cities? I was like, what you mean, man? It's not too far apart. No, that's not what I mean. How you gonna represent both cities? They're two distinct constituent bases. I was like, not really. Not really. Because see, the folks that are over there, you talking about because they're white, right? He's like, yeah, all right. But the folks that are over there that are white, they're low-wage white folks, right? So they have the same issues when it comes to bad schooling, when it comes to police issues, when it comes to employment issues. They got the same issues. And then to be honest, they actually missing certain things because there's certain programs that aren't there. So I don't think I'm gonna have an issue representing both sides because they're both from the same economic,
same social and economic
conditions.
Yeah.
Right? Now he didn't see it. And once I got in office, I had certain areas over there that I knew cats had swastikas on their doors. They'll put my yard sign in the yard. Now I know you have issues, but I'm your rep. And they'll still put the sign in there because
they respect you though.
What was the issue? Right? They didn't I remember I had one that I knocked on his door, he came to the door. And I can't repeat it exactly, but he was like, I'm not effing voting for you. And I was like, I F you, vote for me. Right? And then we talked. We talked for about 30, 40 minutes. And after we got through talking, he took me around the neighborhood and had my sons putting like 3 or 4 of his neighbor's yours. Now I know when I knocked on the door, he seen a black dude with a whole bunch of tattoos. I ain't got no issue with that, cause I am black and I have tattoos. But we gonna talk. Because
once they understand the issues that you ain't trying to marry their daughter, you got health care? No.
I'm just saying.
You making low wages? Your sidewalks being fixed?
Yeah.
Those are common things. I'm here to represent that. I'm not here to represent this other stuff. I'm here to represent you.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, I'm sure that you have decent white constituents.
Yeah.
Especially when at large.
Yeah. Yeah.
They understand where you're coming from. And I think a lot of white people now are waking up behind Trump.
Yeah.
You vote in race where you're in the same position as...
Oh, no. That's a whole nother...
No, when I say that, I think a lot of the majority community, because we lived in this racist world, per se, they vote against their own interests and not really understanding that they're voting against their own interests because these people don't represent them. And when you can have a decent conversation with them and let them know you're in the same social and economic and educational position as these Mexicans, these blacks, or the Haitians and what have you, and I'm here to represent you as a block.
Yeah.
We're not trying to move in your house or your neighborhood.
Yeah. We ain't got to agree with what we want. We ain't got to agree with motivation. We just got to agree with what we want.
Right. And who's going to represent that and really work towards that end.
Yeah.
And boy, that was perfect that you said, hey, they weren't trying to hear what I said, but when they listened a little bit.
Oh man, we sat and talked. And I'm talking about at the end of the conversation, it was a beautiful thing. And that leads me to what I'm doing here. We're going to organize. So I look forward to a 3rd District at Large City Council.
Sorry, tell them when.
Oh yeah, first Fridays, right now we're at the Soiree. I do plan on moving it around, but for at least the next couple months we'll be at the Soiree first Fridays. If you need more information, contact my office, brandon.ellington@kcmo.org, 816-513-6511.
And run down the radio show, because that's my man, George Walker, been a warrior for our community, our youth, and the field of technology and what have you. And you have your show on his network. Run that down again to him.
Yeah, we do What's Real, Real Talk, first and third Sundays.
What are your subjects? I want to close out, but you got so many things. Run down the show, man.
A little bit of everything. So we have a round table. So on the round table, I throw out different hot topics, national issues, city issues, some state issues. I start the show off by reading state news and hitting with city news. That way you get factual information first. Then we start hitting issues, and as we're talking, I always bring back factual information, so you get a little bit of opinions, then you get the fact basis.
Because I think it was the last show I was watching. You had about 4 or 5 guests on there, and you.
Oh man, we run. So we have our resident Republican, Jonas Shields.
Oh yeah, Joe. Yeah, all right. You say resident.
Hey, that's the hat he puts on.
Right.
York Wilson, who does SWD, the gentleman that actually helps me put together the job fairs.
Mm-hmm.
He's part of the round table. We have Nigel with the Hood Hope, who's part of the round table. We have Charles.
What does Nigel do?
Well, he does Hood Hope, which is a non-profit entity. So they take houses, repair houses, a couple other things with you. Then we have Charles Johnson, who runs I'm a Brother's Keeper. He's in there. We have King Kiye, who's part of the round table. Terrence Williams, Bold New Poise, Music and More Foundation. He's the actual basis of the show.
Right.
So we put it together, promote it, and all that good stuff.
We bought. I told you we helped him start that. Serenity bought Terrence over there. I know what's going on.
And with Cascades, we just gonna keep growing because one of the reasons, and I'm gonna use this as a closeout. One of the reasons I decided to come home and run for a local office was the ability to be able to organize and to mobilize the community. At the state level, I was involved in almost 50-something bills that actually got signed, right, as amendments. Most of the people here in Kansas City have no clue what I did up there. Most of the people in Kansas City have no clue what happens at the state. That's a problem. The same when we talk about local politics and actually are paying attention to what's happening, most of us don't. And I understand that it's more of us than it is the talented 10th. It's more of us than it is the HNIC, like you mentioned. It is more of us in the field than it is in the house. The problem is that we've been marginalized and we don't understand the power that we have in the field.
In organizing.
Yeah, and I'm trying to show us the power that we have in the field with the resources that we already have. We ain't got bed for nothing. All we have to do is become serious about what we want, and then we decide what our future is. So either we can have a Kansas City in which we have 150 something murders every year, most of them look like us, or we can have a Kansas City in which black folks can actually enjoy themselves, them youths, and them lives. But in order to do that, we have to look through the lens differently. So we have to look at our parks as not like this is an area. No, this is a park, dog. It's Truth Lake. Any other community, people would be dying to live next to a lake.
Oh, boy.
Because of the aesthetics and also the property value that it increases. We look at Truth Lake as like that's where the crackheads go. We got to flip the way that we look at stuff.
Ghetto gold mine.
Yeah.
As always, when we end, when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself. Good night.
Program is brought to you by the Kansas City Business Association.